So I would like to welcome to this stage Commissioner for European Neighborhood Policy and Enlargement Negotiation, Mr. Johannes Hahn. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Welcome to everybody, friends of Ukraine, one could definitely say. I'm happy to see so many friends from European member states, but also from other countries which share together with me the huge interest to push forward Ukraine and to see Ukraine, to give Ukraine a European perspective so that we can really see what is a future option for this country, for this fantastic country. And I think we are all here together to tell the world that Ukraine can change, that Ukraine is changing and that it is building for a brighter future with the help and the support of all of us, of committed friends in the international community. The government, I think this is pretty clear, not only today, but one is, if you are following it, can say and confirm that it is doing a remarkable work in the most difficult circumstances. They deserve our congratulations on the long and growing list of new laws already passed. And we must give them help and support we can for the difficult next steps of implementing those laws, tackling vested interests and really changing the political, administrative and commercial culture of this country. Some of the changes will definitely require courage and leadership. Higher energy prices for consumers, greater competition for your businesses, but also, for example, an antitrust legislation. Sometimes there will be short-term pain to get a long-term gain. The Ukraine public and some of Ukraine's other neighbors need to know that we are all here to help this country become stronger, more modern, and I think this is also very, very important, more self-sufficient. A country that makes its own choices and delivers security and prosperity for its citizens. But the only way to unlock this country's potential is reform. Reform to create confidence in the rule of law, reform to create a business climate in which an enterprise can flourish, reform to put in place a public administration that really works not only in the capital, but also in the other parts of this huge country. There have been some first steps to reforming the justice sector, but we need to see much more, starting with the entry into force of the new law on the Public Prosecutor's Office and implementation of legislation to bring in a new generation of judges to give this country the justice it deserves. And the setting up of the National Agency for the Prevention of Corruption as soon as possible. The Minister of Economy has done, I think, a great job so far, like many other ministers in the government. He has been telling me about the work he's doing to make a bonfire of regulation that holds back business in this country. Those who have studied, I don't know, my CV know I have been a former businessman, and these people have occasionally problems to accommodate with administrative procedures, which takes their time, and we are usually maybe even more impatient. But nevertheless, we have to see how we can improve the climate in order to improve the situation for investors. This is why I'm here together, and I have understood from the Prime Minister it's not the first and last conference. It should followed by some others, not only here in Ukraine, in Germany, in the United States, maybe in other countries, for target groups who should convinced that it is worth already today to invest in Ukraine. But in order to be successful in these conferences, and not only in the conferences, in such a successful event like today, but in the consequences of such a conference, we have to sweep away the other disincentives which still exist to do business in and with Ukraine. That's why I'm counting on the President and the Prime Minister and the government to stand firm on the reform plans. It's why we applaud the setting up of a National Reform Council to monitor the reforms. And it is why, as President Juncker has said, the European Union is deploying an unprecedented range of support to the Ukraine together with our member states. Already 11 billion euro have been promised last year, 6 billion are already mobilized so far. And this is why, by the way, I would like to prefer to speak about even public investors, investors from other countries, and less, I have to admit, to speak about donors, because it's also in the mindset a difference if you talk about investment or if you talk about donors. If you talk about investment, you expect to get something back, not always in, so to say, monetary terms, but in terms of satisfactions of people, increased welfare level, happiness, which is important, that there is a climate of activity, of creativity in the country. And if you're only talking about donors, it could mean to give something and to leave it and don't have an interest, which I understand is wrong, but simply sometimes it's important to have the right wording. And that's why I prefer really to speak about investments, investors, even from the public sector and not only from the private sector. If we invest as Europeans in Ukraine, we invest in our own peace, in our own stability, and in our own welfare. If Ukraine is doing well, it's also in the interest of us Europeans. That's why I prefer to speak about investments. But once again, it's therefore not only in terms of mere money, it's something more. And in that respect, one could refer to the American Constitution, where already in the first paragraph, the welfare and the happiness of people has been addressed. What can the European Union do? The European Union and its member states offer Ukraine their expertise to make the necessary reforms. Under my authority alone, we have 30 experts that are here to help you to draw up reform strategies and draft new legislation, for example, in key areas like energy and agriculture. The support group is being refocused. Expect to see much more of them in Kiev, because I think it's important, if you have a support group, the people to support the country should be in the country and not in Brussels and somewhere else. So we have to deploy our people here in the country. The association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade area will enter into force next January at the fitness program to transfer Ukraine's economy and society. But the DCFTA brings both challenges and opportunities. We have just taken two decisions worth 110 million euro that will support SMEs and entrepreneurship in regions across the country. We will helping businesses getting access to financing and to adapt the new opportunities to trade with Europe. And we will be paying particular attention to those regions affected by the conflict. But it's important to understand the Ukraine economy has to prepare itself for the full implementation of the DCFTA. It demands a lot of changes. It demands to accommodate with standards, with requirements in order to export to the European Union, and therefore to prepare the economy is of utmost necessity and urgency in this year. So what we want is to do much more. We want to help transform also the public administration to bring in a new culture of transparency where corruption cannot flourish. This means, for example, e-governance, e-public procurement, seconding auditors to help you step up scrutiny, e-government, public procurement also means transparency of procedures, traceability of procedures. So this is a very important contribution, not only to the increased efficiency of the administration, but also to address corruption. We want to tackle these things that are holding you back. Take, for example, energy consumption. It was already addressed today by several speakers. It could bring your energy efficiency in line with the EU average. You would no longer have to import gas. Today, Ukraine is waste energy 10 to 11 times more than the European average. But this waste is not only because of old leaky pipes, it's also because some few are able to take away some gas in order to run their companies, their factories. And here we are talking about fraud, ladies and gentlemen, fraud. And this has to be fixed and this has to be changed. Also, this is a kind of waste, a waste of public property. And if Ukraine is able to address this, and there are first very promising steps, I think we are working and heading into a good direction. Once again, if you take this event today and many others and the last couple of months and what is, so to say, in the pipeline, Ukraine is, for the moment, I think, able, its authorities, to use this momentum, which despite of many problems, is full of opportunities. But our message today from all of us to our Ukrainian friends is that you don't have to face these challenges alone. We are at your side, we are at your disposal. Rely on us, trust on us. We will really like to help us. I have to say, it's in our own interest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Executive Secretary of United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Christian Fries Bach. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased and honored to be here and to deliver a statement on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, and the Secretary General conveys his warm greetings to all you gathered here for the International Ukraine Support Conference. The people of Ukraine have been severely tested since November 2013. They have demonstrated their perseverance and courage in building a stable and prosperous country. A durable and sustainable ceasefire, as well as a negotiated political solution to the conflict in line with the 12th February package of measures for the implementation of the Minsk Agreement is critical. Citizens want to see serious attention given to the multiple deep-rooted political, social, and economic challenges facing the country. The international community must continue to help the government and the people of Ukraine build on last year's historic political change when early presidential and parliamentarian polls resulted in a reform-oriented, responsive leadership and greater prospects for consolidating a democratic system of governance. Ukraine's citizens, who have for years advocated for change, eagerly await the implementation of key reforms which the authorities have committed to implement, particularly given the severe economic challenges and despite the debilitating conflict in the east of the country. The United Nations will continue to support the people and government of Ukraine in their quest towards a more transparent, and inclusive political and democratic culture. In a coordinated and strategic manner, the 16 United Nations funds, programs, and specialized agencies working in Ukraine are working toward providing technical assistance to human development as well as humanitarian support to those in need. The UN humanitarian agencies have, with national and international partners, prioritized assistance to the 3.2 million considered most vulnerable, the children, the elderly, the women, people living with disabilities and special needs. In 2014, 2.6 million people received health kits, 100,000 received food parcels or vouchers, access to safe drinking water. So far this year, 400,000 conflict-affected people have received food, shelter, access to health services, water, sanitation, education. However, this is not enough. We need to intensify efforts to save as many lives as possible and provide the most vulnerable with basic services, and do that while promoting their dignity and ensuring their protection. Upon request from the government of Ukraine, the United Nations, the World Bank, and the European Union conducted the first phase of the Recovery and Peacebuilding Assessment, the RPA. This assessment identified an initial $1.5 billion in needs for rehabilitation of infrastructure and service delivery, for restoration of economic development and livelihood opportunities, and to rebuild the social cohesion and the community security. This response goes well beyond the humanitarian response, and RPA provides an analytical and programmatic baseline and a framework for Ukraine's transition from crisis to sustainable development. The UN will be there to help in this transition. And allow me to also insert that the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe stands ready to strengthen our partnership with Ukraine in the fields of trade facilitation, hosting a seminar even today together with the government of Ukraine, to do so in transport, supporting Ukraine's key role as a transit and transport hub of Europe with our 58 legal transport conventions, support Ukraine with energy, statistics, in strong partnership with UNDP and the other UN agencies. The people of Ukraine can count on the United Nations as a friend, as a partner, to overcome the crisis, to build a peaceful and prosperous future for their country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And peacekeeping mission. Ukraine needs peacekeeping mission too, from UN. Our next speaker is Parliamentary Vice Minister for Foreign Affairs of Japan, Kentaro Sonoura. Welcome.
Dobry dzień. Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. First, allow me to express my appreciation for being given this opportunity today to express Japan's position at this International Support for Ukraine conference. I would also like to express my respect to everyone from the Ukraine government and the European Union who have contributed to holding this meaningful international conference. A quarter century ago, the Berlin Wall collapsed, the Cold War ended, and Ukraine made a fresh start as a nation state. A long time has passed since then. Now, what we hear from Ukraine is news of the war. The values we have so far upheld as important, particularly the rule of law, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, have been violated, and there have been attempts to change the status quo by force. In Asia, there are similar threats. The situation surrounding Ukraine is shaking the foundation of the basic rules of the international community. So, although this is a problem for Europe, it is also a very grave problem for the whole global community, including Asia. But what can be done to bring peace, stability, and prosperity to Ukraine? First, the international community should make united efforts to ensure that all relevant parties fully implement the Minsk Agreement that was reached on February 12. In eastern Ukraine, the situation remains unstable as gunfire and battles have continued in some areas even after the Minsk Agreement. Objective verification of the withdrawal of heavy weapons by the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe should be fully ensured. Second, Ukraine's institutions of state and society should be strengthened. For Ukraine to become a country with resilience, and sustainability, it is essential to carry out bold and comprehensive reforms. It will be impossible to ensure the stability and prosperity of Ukraine without such reforms, including the promotion of anti-corruption efforts, judicial reform, and national integration. Japan will contribute to the peace process in Ukraine and support its nation-building efforts. At the first step in its contribution to the peace process, Japan has recently provided new financial assistance to increase the staff of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Moving forward, Japan will further strengthen its assistance. Meanwhile, I would like to express my respect to all OSCE officials involved in this mission under such difficult circumstances. To assist Ukraine's nation building, Japan is steadily implementing assistance worth approximately $1.84 billion, which is the largest scale on an individual country basis. First, in order to improve the economic situation, Japan announced an assistance package worth totaling around $1.5 billion in 2014, including about $1.1 billion for the modernization of the sewage treatment plant and $100 million in financial support. This year, Japan also announced additional financial support worth $300 million, and it decided to extend a non-project grant aid for the purchase of the product, including medical equipment. Moreover, the Japan-Ukraine Investment Agreement, which was signed in February, will further promote foreign investment that will be essential to Ukraine's growth. We are expecting further improvement of the investment environment. Second, Japan is considering to send Japanese experts to Ukraine in such fields as economic and fiscal management and government. In order to restore democracy, Japan has already been supporting the democratization process through the dispatch of election monitors and technical cooperation provided by the Japan International Cooperation Agency in the field of governance, including the invitation of 6 lawmakers at Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine to Japan this month. In March, we also invited lawmakers in charge of judicial policy to Japan. We are expecting that their experience in Japan will contribute to judicial reform to Ukraine. Third, in order to promote national dialogue and integration, Japan is cooperating with international organizations in assisting internal displaced persons and supporting reconstruction in eastern Ukraine. As the next chair of the G7, Japan will further enhance its engagement with and support for Ukraine in order to achieve a peaceful and diplomatic solution in cooperation with its G7 partners and other like-minded countries. We are expecting that this conference will set forth a specific roadmap toward early implementation of reforms, including the new economic reform program approved by the IMF Executive Board in March, and will demonstrate the Ukrainian government's commitment to the reform initiative. We are also expecting that this conference will send a message that the international community will make concerted efforts to support Ukraine's reform efforts. I pray that peace, stability, and prosperity will arrive in Ukraine without delay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Japan, for your help and for your support. Our next speaker is Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation of Netherlands, Mrs. Liliane Plauman. Welcome.
Dear colleagues, at this present time, Ukraine is confronted with the biggest security and macroeconomic challenges since its independence. The country is fighting for control of its own internationally recognized territory, something truly vital for a country's existence. Therefore, today we talk about the whole of Ukraine, including Crimea and Donbas. Today, we take the first steps towards this country's prosperous future. Profound reforms are key to shaping this future. The word reform, a mere 6 letters, which embody the extremely difficult tasks that lies ahead. Perseverance and determination are required of the ruling elite from us, international donors, and foremost of the Ukrainian people, who at the moment face tremendous hardship. The association agreement and deep and comprehensive free trade area were not entered into overnight and will not be implemented in a day. It's a roadmap for transformation of Ukraine into a free, transparent, accountable, and prosperous country. Reforms have already started, linked to the conditions of the International Monetary Fund. The first brave steps have been taken in the field of fiscal and budget policy. The recent developments are encouragements for other crucial sectors, such as rule of law, judicial and security sectors. In its pursuit of these challenges, it is key that Ukraine seizes the opportunity to benefit from assistance offered by the international community. We have to be honest. Reform's worst enemy is deeply rooted within your country. Corruption has become polycentric and endemic in nature. I commend the steps this government is taking to shape a new legal framework to combat corruption in the public sector, including the justice sector. However, I cannot stress enough the importance of tackling this challenge in order to secure long-term prosperity and stability. But although structures are set in place, Ukraine plays a central role in organizing its own support team. The Dutch effort is based on 3 priorities: stability and security, economic reform, and rule of law. Our contribution to stability and security of Ukraine is mainly channeled via multilateral efforts like NATO trust funds, the EU Advisory Mission for Civilian Security Sector Reform, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, as well as the High Commissioner on National Minorities. The Netherlands is well aware of the economic potential of Ukraine. We are the 3rd foreign investor in Ukraine. Our efforts aim to improve the business climate and the trade relations, not only on a national level, but also by technical assistance to local chambers of commerce. And last but certainly not least, rule of law. It is with good reason that the Maidan revolt has been marked as the revolution of dignity. A fully independent judiciary is key to political stability, to a healthy business climate, and to a relation of trust between government and population. As such, legal empowerment of Ukraine's citizens and civil society will be at the heart of the Dutch efforts. I want to conclude by referring briefly to the downing of the MH17 last summer. This strategy, which costs the lives of 298 innocent people from 18 nations, has had a huge impact on my country. The Netherlands, as the leading nation in the repatriation mission and the international investigation, is grateful for Ukraine's support and the empathy expressed by the Ukrainian people. Together, we will bring those responsible for this strategy to justice. I thank Ukraine for providing us the opportunity to discuss our common effort to support Ukraine, today and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Netherlands, for support. Thank you. Our next speaker is Secretary of State of Swiss Federal Department for Foreign Affairs, Manuel Sagar. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I would also like to start by thanking the Ukrainian government for holding this important conference and for inviting Switzerland to participate. We are meeting here in Kiev today to reaffirm our support to Ukraine in overcoming its crisis, in restoring peace, and in creating prosperity for all Ukrainians. The conflict in eastern Ukraine has gone on too long, has claimed too many lives, and has caused too much suffering. This is of grave concern to all of us. This is why we need to stand together in helping Ukrainian people face their multiple challenges, from ending the violent conflict in the east to implementing a broad set of reforms and improving the country's financial situation. This is my main message today. Switzerland will remain unwavering in its support to Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in their desire to return to peace. We will continue to provide humanitarian relief to the victims of violent confrontations in the conflict areas, as well as longer-term assistance to bolster Ukraine's economy. Switzerland's resolve to contribute to a better future for Ukraine and to overcoming the broader crisis of European security is strong, focusing on the three following areas. First, Switzerland will continue to be actively involved in the efforts of the OSCE to defuse the current conflict, working closely with Serbia and Germany in the OSCE Troika. Switzerland also remains a strong supporter of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission to Ukraine. Second, Switzerland will continue to provide humanitarian assistance wherever needed, through direct relief actions as well as contributions to multilateral programs. In the coming weeks, we expect a convoy of trucks to bring urgently needed chemical reagents for the operation of the regional drinking water system managed by Donbass Water Services in Donetsk. Our interventions are aimed at helping vulnerable populations on both sides of the divide. They include the provision of medical equipment and the support to mobile primary healthcare units. Swiss staff will continue to be seconded to international humanitarian organizations to strengthen their activities and to improve coordination. Third, Switzerland is committed to its long-term bilateral engagement in Ukraine. Under the new Swiss cooperation strategy for Ukraine, we have decided to double our budget to about $100 million. For the first time, the strategy comprises a peace-building component. This allows for longer-term bilateral efforts to support a peaceful resolution of the conflict by promoting dialogue, human rights, and international humanitarian law. Another key aspect of the cooperation strategy is decentralization and local governance. Further themes include support for healthcare reform, for sustainable and sufficient energy management, and for making Ukraine more business-friendly. Ladies and gentlemen, progress on the reform agenda is critical for stabilizing the country. The priorities in Switzerland's cooperation strategy I just mentioned respond to the major needs for reform in Ukraine. Let me focus on decentralization, a key area for achieving a comprehensive political settlement to the armed conflict. Switzerland co-leads the donor sector group and is increasing its strong programmatic focus on decentralization for the period 2015 to 2018, with a strong link to the current conflict situation. Our project provides models for decentralized service provision, such as improving people's access to clean water, sanitation, and a functioning solid waste management system. Based on our experience so far, we are convinced that including all segments of society and gaining consent of the wider population are crucial for success of Ukraine's reform path. Let me reiterate in conclusion that Switzerland remains firmly committed to supporting Ukraine in its current crisis, as well as its long-term efforts to address the needs to reform, to build an inclusive and prosperous society. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard a lot over the past few hours about the multiple challenges that Ukraine faces. Let me just end perhaps with a personal counterpoint, if you will, anecdotal, maybe overly anecdotal as it may be. I came here in 1990 as a young diplomat to give a presentation at the University of Kiev on international humanitarian law. After my presentation, I walked through the streets of a very great city. I went to department stores and saw very empty shelves. There was nothing there to buy. And I came back in 2008 to attend the conference, the annual meeting of the EBRD. I was ED at the time in London. It was a very changed city. It was a city full of colors. The shelves were full. There were plenty of great restaurants, and people were reasonably optimistic. And I come back today. It still seems like a very colorful city. The people seem reasonably happy, maybe a little less optimistic. But it's, as I said, we've heard a lot about the challenges. But to the Ukrainian people, perhaps as a word of encouragement, you are on the right track. You are on the right path, and we are here to help you. But don't be discouraged. Things will get better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm listening to all these speeches, and it's so encouraging. And with this group of friends, Ukraine could not fail. There's no way. Our next speaker is Secretary of State of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, Markus Ederer. Welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, I also want to join those who thank the Ukrainian government, and I think we should also thank the moderator for patiently listening to this plethora of speeches. You will be the only one who listened to all speeches, but I believe, having listened to the contributions by colleagues and the presidents this morning, that the conference, maybe together with the EU-Ukraine summit yesterday, is achieving its objective. And the objective is, I think, to send a powerful signal of support for Ukraine's efforts to Europeanize, further Europeanize, democratize, and follow the path of reform. There has been talk this morning about the two fronts Ukraine is facing. And it sounded to me that one front is the military front in the east and the other one is the reform front. But let me suggest that there is an important third front, maybe first front, and that's the Minsk process, which we have to push in all its components. A true ceasefire and a political process, leading to the results which are foreseen in the Minsk implementation package of February. And while the fighting has subsided. I think that has saved lots of human lives, and we will have to try to calm the situation in the two troubled spots of Donetsk Airport and Shirokinen. And we have to push for the political process. And I venture to predict that this front may be the most important front to find a political solution to this conflict in eastern Ukraine where there is no military solution. Let me put this to you because Germany has been leading on a number of important issues here. On the Minsk implementation package, certainly together with France. And we are fully convinced that only if we settle this diplomatically, there will be a lasting way out of the crisis as it is presenting itself. Germany has been also leading on other fronts. Germany has been pivotal in bringing Europe to a middle ground when it came to sanctions against Russia, in the European context and I think also in the transatlantic context. Germany is one of the main contributors when it comes to addressing the humanitarian plight. And since we are at this support conference, let me dwell a few minutes on what Germany is doing in the economic field and supporting reforms. This year alone, Germany will disburse 700 million euros in bilateral support, 500 million euros for non-tied financial loans, partially going to budget support and partially going to big projects. But at the same time, Germany will disburse 200 million euros in grants in various fields: energy and energy efficiency, economic development and infrastructure, decentralization and municipal governance, rule of law, fighting corruption, and finally on civil society. Of course, and I refer to that, we have heard a lot of speeches today. We believe it's now time to turn words into deeds. And when it comes to our part of the deal, Europeans, Western community, G7, it's about making true on the pledges which have been made today. And when it comes to Ukraine, it is about implementing the promised reforms: deregulation, establishing better rule of law, decentralization and constitutional reform, fighting corruption, attract investors, which I believe will be the objective of one of the next conferences. But let me also say what we see as important factors in succeeding together. One is we need definitely coordination of all the contributions of the international community, led by Ukraine. In Germany and in the EU, we feel that without such coordination, Ukraine will lose and we will all lose because we will be blamed of doing much of the same and not important other things. So that would be one point. And the other point, maybe referring back to the EU-Ukraine summit, we need better coordination in the Ukrainian government on European integration matters, in helping to implement the AA-DCFTA to which Europe and Germany are very committed. Let me conclude by saying that I believe that the message emanating from this conference is a very strong resolve by Ukraine and the international community together to turn Ukraine into a viable state, a viable market economy, and to the Ukrainian people, which we hope will then be able to live in prosperity, freedom, and security. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Germany, for your leadership in this peaceful peacekeeping process. Our next speaker is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, Martin Lidegaard. Welcome.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Never waste a crisis. This classic idiom comes to mind when thinking of Ukraine. The last year of challenges have put this country to a situation where we have the most pro-European government and parliament to date, and this surely is a window of opportunity. On the other hand, we also know that there are still strong forces in Ukraine which interest dead set against reforms, and that's why we need the political commitment not only to put the law in place, which can make a difference, but also to implement them, to execute them. And if you should sum up all the good arguments for reforms which have been given today, you could somehow concentrate them to 3 basic incentives for reforms. Economic incentives. If we are to take Ukraine out of the economic crisis, it takes investments. And to have investments, you will need stability and rule of law. Another incentive will be political. I think that your countrymen are watching. The people will hold both the government, the president, and the parliament accountable that they will deliver reforms, not least when it comes to anti-corruption. And finally, there are very strategic incentives when it comes to making Ukraine a success. To make Ukraine a success is probably the best you can do to solve the conflict in the East. And that's why reforms are so essential. And that's why also the Danish government will stand by to assist. We are already actively engaged in cooperation with our Ukrainian counterparts. Through our Danish neighborhood program, we support already with more than 30 million euros over 5 years, and we will add to that 20 million euro in the years to come. This goes to reforms within economic growth, anti-corruption, reform of the justice sector, the protection of human rights, free and critical media, not least Russian-speaking media, and of course an active civil society. But probably the most important cornerstone of our activities is reforms in the energy sector. Because exactly in the energy sector, you have the key for success. When it comes to economy, probably no other sector could achieve more private investments, and it's more vital to make the private sector in Ukraine competitive. When it comes to political gains, this is the sector where most corruption has been concentrated, and where you, if you get it right, you have a possibility to really do things better in that field. And finally, when it comes to strategy and security, it's obvious that to have a more independent and efficient energy sector will make a huge difference. And that's why we are very proud today to open a Danish-Ukrainian energy center. But having said that, I also have to strike that the energy sector is the best example of what is needed among us who are gathered here today, and that is coordination. Coordination, of course, between the ministries in Ukraine, but also coordination among all the different donor countries, all the different experts we are sending out, and not least among the great players like the EU Commission, like the UN, and all the single countries. And I urge and I call upon you, Commissioner Hahn, that you will take lead on this to gather us in united efforts. We will be there. We have some to contribute with from Denmark. We know that an efficient and diversified energy sector, which is also more clean, is not only better for corruption, for climate, for investments, it's also better when it comes to economy and when it comes to pricing. We're looking forward to cooperate with Ukraine, but also to cooperate with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And true, coordination is needed. Coordination is needed, and it would be fantastic if European Commission can take lead in that coordination efforts. And maybe that would be the plan that we are talking about so much. So our next speaker is State Secretary of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, Hans Bratskar. Welcome.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The Ukrainian revolution of dignity has indeed impressed the world, and it's not over yet. We recognize the immensity of the task Ukraine is faced with, conducting deep structural reforms under very difficult circumstances. Expectations are high, and they should be. The best response to Russian aggression would be a successful Ukraine. A Ukraine that succeeds in eradicating corruption and providing education and job opportunities for all its citizens. We are here today because we continue to support Ukraine. And let me thank the government leaders today for providing an honest view of the challenges Ukraine is facing. Norway has a long-term perspective for our partnership, and we are increasing our support for Ukraine's endeavors. For us, the macro-financial situation is an obvious priority. Unless Ukraine is able to stabilize the macro-financial situation, many other important reform initiatives will be of little use. Since 2013, Norway's support to Ukraine has increased tenfold. And in 2015, we will provide a total of 35 million euros. These numbers are a reflection of the strong Norwegian commitment to the people and government of Ukraine. And to be crystal clear, we are committed to a long-term partnership as Ukraine continues to implement the necessary reforms. Norway plans to disperse budget support this year, and we encourage all other states to consider such assistance. Furthermore, we are focusing our assistance on energy reform, European integration, and on good governance, transparency, and accountability. And here I would like to highlight the Nordic Energy Efficiency and Humanitarian Initiative for Ukraine, which was launched last autumn together with the other Nordic countries. And in support of Ukraine, I'd like to stress that we cannot overestimate the importance of a strong civil society and free media. Pressure from civil society and free media should be welcomed by any government, and I am encouraged by the strength and vitality of civil society here in Ukraine. Corruption stifles business and the ability of citizens to realize their potential and pursue their dreams. This is true at all levels of society. Widespread corruption is a curse, and it also makes it harder for us to provide necessary assistance. A prosperous Ukraine that is trading on predictable terms with its neighbors would be good news to all its neighbors, contrary to what some of these neighbors might believe. Ukraine has proven that it's not a pawn on a board of chess, but a proud and independent nation, free to make its own choices. Let us therefore work together to ensure that the revolution of dignity is turned into a life of dignity for all of the citizens of Ukraine, from Lviv to Odessa, to Kiev, to Donetsk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia, Ms. Kate Pentus-Rosimannus. Welcome. For pronunciation.
Thank you very much, Miroslava, dear Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I think that I fell in love with Ukraine when I was about that size. I first visited Kiev then, and thing that I took with me, or that I still remember, was that people here in Kiev were very warm. very open-hearted, and they were always believing in better future, in better tomorrow. And although several things have changed really a lot since then, I think this is something that has really remained the same. I think if there were, I don't know, a Euro Cup or a World Cup of strong will, for sure Ukrainians would be champions of that cup. But today, of course, I really want to thank you for this very timely opportunity. First, to hear about Ukraine's reform process, and also, of course, to voice our support. I think that today's event will solidify our relations with Ukraine, and I think also hopefully help to plan next steps. What we would really like to do here today is also to manifest our very strong support for Ukraine's sovereignty and of course also territorial integrity. Ukraine has chosen closer integration with Europe, a sovereign and free choice that Estonia fully supports. We are standing with you and by you in your efforts to bring about the transitions demanded actually by Ukrainian people. And based on our own Estonian experience, we can assure you, just as it was discussed in Tallinn in Lennart Meri conference during this weekend, that if there is a strong will, for sure there will be and is also a way. There are numerous really crucial reforms ahead of you. Many of those have been mentioned here today as well, and all of those, of course, are relevant and important, but again, departing from Estonian experience, it is not possible to overestimate the relevance of a stable regime of the rule of law in one's country. Maidan revolution was about dignity and about democracy. The rule of law is about the principle of fairness in the society. It really does guarantee that nobody can manipulate with laws and be manipulated by using court system, prosecutor's office, or whatever kind of state institutions. This is also the most effective way to kill the corruption, to improve the investment climate that for sure is crucial and really necessary for whichever country's development and success, but also depoliticize the public administration in general. So we do follow keenly your efforts to reform prosecutor's office, court system, and the whole justice sector. And from all our heart, we do wish you success. We do see that new legal culture based on the rule of law is really crucial for the future of your country. Also, institutions, of course, are important. Again, what we learned from our European integration process was the importance of an effective governmental monitoring and also coordination mechanism to synchronize all the efforts. The coordination mechanism does need a really clear mandate and full support from the highest authorities. Implementation of the reform agenda, especially association agreement, is a task where this kind of mechanism or framework, I would say, is simply indispensable. Estonia has supported Ukraine in quite many different ways, quite a variety of ways. And when it comes to the numbers, our assistance last year reached 1.2 million euros. Today, I can assure that Ukraine is and remains the top priority of our development cooperation, and that fact is reflected also in a considerable increase in our assistance to Ukraine. We have doubled our support this year, so it will amount now 2.35 million euros 2015. So Ukraine has been our very close and really long time partner in development cooperation. For us, the starting point of our support actually has been first and foremost the necessities of Ukraine itself. And therefore, now we do have our eyes on the Ukraine reform agenda, in particular the plans regarding democratic development and of course also strengthening the public sector, including e-government that also Commissioner Hahn really touched into more detailed way. And this is for us the avenue where we wish to pursue our cooperation further. Estonia is ready to continue to also offer added value by sharing our know-how on public sector and legislative reforms. So this is one thing for sure you can count on. We do see that only and mainly reforms can free Ukraine from the need to rely on international assistance, which should be also viewed as a measure to get the country on track. Just as many of my colleagues have said before, we, from our experience, know that some reforms can be difficult and will be difficult and are difficult. They also can be sometimes unpopular, but at the same time, they really are absolutely necessary. A very clear break with the past will make Ukraine much more resilient to external pressure, also to help to fight back foreign aggressors. And once more, Estonia fully supports Ukraine on this path that contributes also to the prosperity, well-being and stability, not only in Ukraine, but in whole Europe. From all my heart, I can say that I believe in Ukraine. So, Slava Ukraini.
Slava Ukraini. Slava Estonia. Thank you so much. And our next speaker from our friends from Baltic states, Minister of Finance of Lithuania, Romantas Sadžius. Welcome.
Thank you, Miroslava. Dear friends, because we are friends, Ukrainians are our friends, and here are friends of Ukraine. So, dear friends, I can tell you that I feel very special at this microphone for two reasons. The first one, there is a very special relation between Ukraine and my home country, Lithuania. It perhaps was a turn point, quite very important turn point in the end of 2013 during our presidency in the European Union. It was a summit, Eastern Partnership Summit in Vilnius. You recall it. Then it started. The second, the other issues that connect our countries is, to some extent, common fate. Anyway, we came from the Soviet Union. Lithuania perhaps was a bit more successful for different reasons. During 25 years, starting from re-establishment of our independence in 1990, we came through many difficulties. It was not easy. Now we are members of the Eurozone as of 1st of January this year. What is the main lesson of this way? The main lesson of Lithuanians is that Euro adoption is not the end of the way, just the beginning. And this is very important to understand for both of us, that the history will continue, and we should go together. Cooperation between us also is very special. Of course, financial assistance, humanitarian assistance, but also our expertise that is widely used. Miroslava, let me joke a bit, we also delegated one expert to your government. You know whom I mean. I think he does well. He does a good job. I respect him very much, at least. So I think we can cooperate further, exchange our expertise. The second reason why I'm so in special position here, I'm the only representative here of the Council of European Union Economics and Finance Ministers, so-called ECOFIN. You may know that the decisions in the European Union are taken by the Council of Ministers, plus the Commission, Commissioner Hahn is still in the hall, and the European Parliament. This was the case also with the quite last decision concerning Ukraine about granting the macro-financial assistance of 1.8 billion of euros. I'm very happy to say that I took part in the discussions on this issue. These discussions were not simple, were not easy. They were constructive. They were substantial. They always are behind the closed doors. But let me a bit open the door. It is my feeling that the mood of the finance ministers of the European Union is that 1.8 is not the final point. But finance ministers are so practical people, so that granting any assistance, they put, as we say, conditionalities on that. What are conditionalities? It's simple. Design and implementation of reforms that we talked so a lot about during this morning. And the success of reforms is a necessary condition for this to work. Of course, out of 11 billion of European assistance, the last part comes as financing for projects, which should be and will be, I'm sure, commercially viable. And this assistance comes from our banks, our European Bank, European Investment Bank, also European entity, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I'm very glad that there are projects that could be successfully financed in Ukraine. I think Ukrainians should look further into possibilities to get further assistance. And this is commercial assistance, loans from these banks. These are quite good loans with low interest rates, so use it just to heat up the engine, economic engine. But also macro-financial assistance where the results should be proper reforms in the public sector. There was a lot of talks about corruption and shadow economy, which is a fact, which is a real problem for Ukrainian economy. What could outweigh it? Of course, it is impossible to give a full and exhaustive recite what to do with that. But let me add a couple of points, only 3 points that I see that could help very much. First is transparency of public money and public assets. It is urgent for Ukraine to have this transparency. And I'm happy, I think it will be very interesting to learn more in the afternoon sessions, panel discussions, what the Ukrainian government is doing in this direction. The second point, very important point, where very little people know what to do precisely, is stability in the financial sector, in the banking sector, financial services sector, which is also of urgency in Ukraine. And the third, last but not least, as people say, to my mind, it is an extremely important issue for Ukraine, is, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, social balance. In everything you do, whatever expedient you would see in the reform process, social balance should be kept. This is experience of my country. This is experience of other Baltic countries. This is experience of many transition countries after the fall of the communist regime in Europe. Social balance is something that should be sought for, and it should be ensured. When it comes to a very difficult situation, people tend to look at the basics. History repeats in larger or smaller scale. Several days ago, for preparing for one of conferences, I recalled that I'm as old as the Treaty of Rome, almost as old as the Treaty of Rome that established the European Union. And what was the idea, European idea, that brought us from the war to the prosperity? Oh, very simple. It has become also a general place in many speeches. Peace, democracy, and human rights. Simple to say. Very complicated issue to establish. What is the European way? It is growth, jobs, leading to prosperity. This is a single market. Single market that helped Europe, the core of Europe, which is called now European Union, to start operating properly. And I think this is another key to the difficult situation with all the fronts where the word peace sounds so actually and so importantly in this audience and in this country. I think the economic growth, single market, creation of jobs, this can be a key. I read quite a disappointing information from Ukrainian statistics today in the morning on GDP growth. So I wish you, let's put our efforts together to start this engine work. I think if we achieve together that this year, 2015, would be the last year of Ukrainian recession, if in 2016 you get at least 1 percentage point of real GDP growth, and I believe there are all conditions in place, this could be the strongest signal to the world, to your opponents, but the main issue is to yourselves, that we all can do things. Thank you very much, and the very best luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your encouraging words and recommendations. Our next speaker is Vice President of International Finance Corporation, Dimitrios Tsitseradogos. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon and greetings to all the distinguished guests. I think many of the themes that we all talk about are very common here, but I wanted to put a bit of a different spin to them. Ukraine today is at a critical moment for its development. Millions are hoping for a breakthrough, despite unprecedented challenges that the country is now facing on many fronts, including the microeconomic front. As we just heard, for the second year in a row, the economy is in a recession. Inflation is surging, industrial output is plunging. These are the bad news. The good news, and the one common theme we heard throughout the presentations, is there is strong momentum for reform. At the same time, the long-term potential of Ukraine is tremendous. So the questions are, how do we realize that potential? And how does Ukraine have a chance to become a new economic champion in the region? We feel that Ukraine has all the ingredients for success. the human talent, fertile agricultural land, favorable geography, and a large domestic market. It also has a strong desire for change. But this potential has yet to be properly harnessed. The legacy of previous delays with reforms is biting. The country has underperformed for years in comparison to its regional peers. We just heard it. On the eve of its independence, the economy of Ukraine started at about the same size as Poland's. Today, it's half the size of Poland. Private sector is not growing. And why? The growth of the Ukraine's private sector has been stunted in many ways. The cause of this is cumbersome regulations, limited access to finance, poor governance, and a lack of competition that have held back entrepreneurship, innovation, and productivity and undermined growth. The same, when I compared Ukraine to Poland, we see the same thing in the doing business rankings of the World Bank Group, where Ukraine ranks 96th out of 189 countries in the world and far below its neighbors. So what can be done about it? We feel that to move ahead, Ukraine needs to emulate the more successful economies of the new EU member states. For Ukraine to grow and the private sector to grow and prosper and create jobs, the country needs to break the vicious circle of weak governance, weak property rights, poor business environment, and the country has to tackle corruption. The World Bank Enterprise Survey highlights limited access to finance and corruption as the main constraints for Ukrainian companies. If I would say 2 issues need to be tackled in the short term, these are the ones. The other thing what I would say is the government need to focus, and we heard it earlier, on establishing Ukraine as an investment destination. If you look at Ukraine on the map of investment destinations in the world, it doesn't appear anywhere. And that is before what is happening in the East. And the reason for that is that what investors look for in a country don't exist in Ukraine. These are simpler regulations, the rule of law, and a level playing field for companies. These are areas that, are needed, and this is what the country should focus on. And this is where international financial institutions like ourselves can provide strategic support. This is part of our role at IFC, to demonstrate the power of the private sector and show the market that investment opportunities are out there and that we're willing to invest and attract others to those markets. The World Bank Group and our partners are already providing strong support for the change agenda in Ukraine. Over the last year, we as the World Bank Group provided almost $3 billion to the country. That's between the bank, the World Bank, and IFC, which is a record for what we've been doing in the country recently. We as IFC have been a long-term partner of the Ukrainian private sector. And we've done this because we think that Ukraine is a crucial country in this region. We're also doing it because we recognize the tremendous challenges that the country is facing. Today, we are ready to take on more risks, innovate, and offer new solutions. We want to help the government strengthen the public sector, increase efficiency, and bring in more private expertise and finance. If we look at today what we're doing in Ukraine, we focus in 3 key pillars: agribusiness, the financial sector, and energy efficiency. Agribusiness is a key advantage for Ukraine, and it's a sector that still has potential to grow. And we feel that, as one of the things that people focus here on Ukraine, we don't talk some about the global challenges. Food security is one of the global challenges. And Ukraine can play a much bigger role in addressing the global challenge of food security. And we are ready to support that, bringing in foreign investors, supporting Ukrainian investors, and also opening new markets for Ukrainian products. The financial sector, I think we heard it in the earlier presentation, this is another challenge. I think high levels of NPLs in the system, they don't allow banks to continue lending. Liquidity is a problem. So I think one of the challenges here is, how we can clean up the banking system, and also how we can get more financing for the local entrepreneurs. And then there is the areas of infrastructure and the energy sector. modernizing these industries is vital for Ukraine's long-term development. I think somebody talked about earlier about the energy efficiency, and the energy saving potential of Ukraine can be as high in some sectors as 50% of the current energy production. I think you can just think about the magnitude of these numbers when the country imports, gas and oil. And I think at the same time, one can work on improving and increasing the potential of Ukraine's domestic oil and gas production. To summarize, there is no doubt that Ukraine has many strengths that could help it to become Eastern Europe's future economic powerhouse. It has lagged behind, partly because of its poor business environment and the fact that the private sector has not been given sufficient chance to grow. But the good news today is that the reform process is gaining ground, and there is a huge appetite for change. We have scaled up our program, and what we want to do, and I think one of the main goals of IFC and the World Bank Group, is to use our global reach and expertise to bring in foreign investment into the country. And not only the focus, here is always look west and focus on bringing investments into Ukraine from Europe. But I think there is investments that can come into Ukraine from the Middle East and also from Asia. And these are investments that are not here today. I think the other thing that is going to be important is the cooperation and the coordination of all development partners like ourselves. I mean, we look to working in Ukraine with people like EBRD, EIB. I think we are the World Bank Group, we cannot succeed without the support of these other multilateral institutions here. To reach the next stage of development, Ukraine needs to unleash also the entrepreneurial spirit of its private sector, businesses small and large, and foster the inclusive, sustainable growth that's so vital to a prosperous society. Ukraine has a chance to reinvent itself as a success story. If the government, private sector, and Ukraine's partners do their homework, as we believe they can, we are sure it can happen here. Thank you for inviting me here today. I hope this meeting and the series of meetings that I understand will follow will help usher in a new era and a more prosperous and equitable Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your honest assessment and for your frank recommendations. Our next speaker is Secretary of State of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Peter Stenlund. Welcome.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me seize the opportunity to thank the Ukrainian government for organizing this timely meeting and previous speakers for your informative and inspiring presentations. On behalf of the government of Finland, I would like to express our solidarity with Ukraine during these difficult times. In face of the conflict, Finland has assisted in addition to multilateral and EU support Ukraine since last year with 40 million euros, and new projects are in planning. We reiterate our full support for the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine. This is the only basis for a sustainable solution to the conflict. The Minsk Protocol must be implemented, and Finland has strengthened its support to the OSCE for fulfilling its task under the Minsk Agreement. We are actually one of the biggest contributors to the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. At the moment, we aim to increase our monitors to up to 30 people. We are here today to discuss the Ukrainian reforms and the continued efforts needed to implement them. Finland welcomes the reforms that Ukraine has already done to consolidate the functioning of democratic and economic institutions and to strengthen the protection of human rights and the rule of law. Ukraine has shown political will to make important reforms in public administration and in state building. However, success depends on tangible results in implementation in practice. We encourage you to take further steps in the constitutional reform process, as well as in good governance, in the justice sector, in decentralization, and in the fight against corruption. We welcome your ambition to reach the top 50 level in the anti-corruption index. Finland is directing its assistance mostly to the energy sector, public administration, and state building. In energy, in addition to ongoing projects, Finland will allocate 3 million euros to NEFCO's Nordic Energy Efficiency and Humanitarian Support Initiative. A large part of this sum will be used for transportable buildings to eastern or southern Ukraine. Our contribution to the Chernobyl shelter has been 8 million euros, and to the E5P fund 2 million euros. In the state building process, we will continue our support through the Council of Europe, the EU Advisory Mission, and also through bilateral projects. Ladies and gentlemen, many reforms are still to be done, and long-term commitment is needed from all of us. While support from all of us is essential, the ownership has to remain with Ukraine. Please be assured that Finland remains committed to stand by Ukraine in these challenging times. And as a recent sign of this, Finland ratified the association agreement last Friday, and we will certainly contribute to utilizing all the potential of this agreement. I wish Ukraine courage and success in the demanding work ahead. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much.